The government's attempt today to define extremism comes during a war of words between Labour and the Conservatives over which party has a bigger problem with racism. Meanwhile, a real war rages on in Gaza. To discuss that and more, we're in Liverpool, a city synonymous, of course, with the Beatles, but also dominated by Labour at local and national level for as long as anyone can remember. But our audience here is a broad reflection of the electoral picture across the nation. Welcome to Question Time. From the government, Lee Rowley is Housing Minister in the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities. He's been MP for North East Derbyshire since 2017 and was previously a Deputy Chairman of the Conservatives. From Labour, Jonathan Reynolds is the Shadow Secretary for Business and Trade, who was elected in 2010 as MP for Stalybridge and Hyde in Greater Manchester. Stephen Flynn leads the Scottish National Party's 43 MPs at Westminster and has done so for nearly a year and a half. The man from Dundee is MP for Aberdeen South. Aisha Hazarika hosts Times Radio's Weekend Drive Time shows and a political podcast called The Power Test. Before that, she was an advisor to then Labour leader Ed Miliband, and she's just been nominated for a life peerage by the now Labour leader Keir Starmer. Melanie Phillips is a columnist, journalist and author. She's worked for The Guardian, The Sunday Times, The Spectator and Jewish Chronicle, among others. She's also written nearly a dozen books over 4 decades and now has a column in The Times. Good evening. Welcome to our panellists. Welcome to audience here in Liverpool. Great to see you. Welcome to you at home. You can catch up with the programme in all sorts of ways on BBC Sounds, on the iPlayer, and of course, there's always a discussion going on social media. Right, let's take our first question, which is from Louise Osman.
Will the Community Secretary announcement, Michael Gove's announcement today, revising the definition of extremism, which we've been waiting for a long time, actually prevent extremism?
So, as you say, this was announced by Michael Gove today by your boss. An abbreviated version of it, let me just share it with you, is defining extremism as the promotion of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance to undermine fundamental rights and the UK's liberal parliamentary democracy. Will it actually prevent extremism, Lee?
Well, we hope so, and that's why we brought it forward, because we recognise that the approach needs to change. It needs to change post the 7th of October. We've seen more extremism within the United Kingdom, but also we always need to go back and look at policy again every so often to make sure it works, to make sure it's appropriate for today. It's a very difficult area. It's one of the reasons why it's creating so much debate. But what my boss, what Michael has said, Michael Gove, is that we need more precision in terms of when we define extremism. And then we need greater clarity from government about not engaging with those who are defined as extremists. And it's all part of a plan to try to make sure that we protect freedom of speech, which is absolutely vital. And then on the other side, you've got criminality, which absolutely people need to throw the book at. But there's a bit in the middle where we need to make sure that those people who are trying to undermine, fundamentally undermine, rule of law, democracy, the values which we all live by, and we built our country over several hundred years, that those are people who we need to call out, and we have to say we're not going to engage in government from.
So when you see that you need a more precise definition, I was watching the debate this afternoon, and so you had Robert Jenrick, obviously former, from the Home Office, saying, I fear the definition lands in no man's land, not going far enough to tackle the real extremists, not doing enough to protect the non-extremists. And watching the debate, who's welcoming this from your side?
Well,
I saw a lot of criticism. I didn't see many people saying this is a great idea.
It's a challenging policy area. There's no doubt about that, and that's why it's taken time to get here. But what Michael is trying to do is he's not going to run over there and not deal with it. He's absolutely trying to deal with it. What I saw actually today, I thought the Labour response was relatively constructive. I thought most of the people sat on my benches, on the Conservative benches, were trying to be constructive about it. But this is the first part of a series of a plan. And so Michael has announced the broad outline today, the broad approach, and then we will come back in a number of weeks' time to talk about the specific groups, the precision about who is and who isn't extreme, and also recognising that we have to tread carefully here, but we do have to do something about this because the rise of extremism is unacceptable.
Do you welcome this, Jonathan? Do you support it? Do you support this definition?
Well, It's a really important issue, and I welcome the question. I can't tell you yet whether this will solve the problem, whether this definition is the right one, because you've got to see how it works in practice. And I do, to be honest, I worry that fundamentally this is about, can this government bring people together? Can it build community cohesion to do that? I think a lot of people, to be honest, don't really trust this government to be able to do that. But, you know, whatever definition you have, the question is, what are you going to do to really tackle this? Because we've got to clamp down on extremism. You know, the government's counter-extremism strategy, I think, is 9 years out of date. You know, what are they going to actually do with this definition to do it?
But
How are we going to tackle...
Just to be clear, do you support the definition as outlined by Michael Gove?
We'll have to see what it does. I mean, I find it's a very broad definition, to be honest. I want to know how it will be used. I want to know how we will tackle online radicalisation, which has become a huge problem. I want to know what will we do specifically around anti-Semitism, around Islamophobia. Those require specific responses. So I absolutely agree, we agree, that we've got to have some serious action on clamping down on extremism. But can this government do it? And can it be the case, if it's a definition that's just come from one politician, to define who is the other side of that definition? I am honestly not sure. But what we really want is some proper action that will deliver this. And I think at the minute, to be honest, we cannot say at this stage whether this will do it.
OK. Stephen, I'll come to you in a minute. I just saw loads of hands shoot up, so if you'll forgive me, I'm just going to go to the audience quickly. The woman there in the black, yes.
Hi. I think with that definition of extremism, what would the Tory party say then about what Frank Hester said about Diane Abbott this week?
Well, we'd say it wouldn't be covered by that, because the whole point of this issue, putting it, and I'm happy to talk about. I'm very happy to talk about Frank Hester in a moment.
It's racism.
If that's necessary.
It's extremism.
But this is about organisations, and if we conflate these two things, which we can do, it won't get us a great deal further in either debate. This is about a long-term approach to try to ensure that those organisations who sit and stand in our country, enabled through the very values which we all share, but who are trying to undermine those values, we have to say that's not appropriate, that needs calling out, it needs stopping.
And you've made that point. You say you shouldn't conflate those two things. I just point out that former Chancellor George Osborne has done that today, and he said it's interesting, I mean, I'm just quoting in that the government won't give money to extremists, doesn't want to fund extremists, but is happy to take money from someone who appears to fall under that new definition of extremism.
Well, we've got a choice, as I said. We've got a choice as a society. We've said that what Frank Hester said was wrong and it was racist. And here, now, the debate, the question, the thing in front of us right now, is how we make sure, over the long run, when Frank Hester isn't in the news in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, when something else has come up, when the Labour or the Liberals or the SNP have got a problem like we've had this week, you know, ultimately we make sure that still we are stopping people misusing our values. We shouldn't be naive in this country. If we believe in liberal democracy, we have to fight for it.
Stephen.
Look, the good news is that this Conservative government is coming to an end. The bad news is that they've not realised it yet, so they're going to spend... They're going... So they're going to spend whatever time they have left seeking to divide, deflect and distract from the chaos of the last 14 years, austerity, public services on their knees, the damage of Brexit, a Prime Minister who lied, a Prime Minister who crashed
OK, but Stephen,
the
about
economy.
The question from Louise is will it actually prevent extremism?
And this is an important point, because we cannot allow ourselves to fall for that distraction. We need to make sure that we do as the good people of Liverpool have done since 1983 and the people of Scotland have done since 1955, and reject the Tories at the ballot box. And when it comes to extremism, I think someone should provide Lee in the Conservative Party with a mirror, because the only people who have threatened parliamentary democracy on these isles are the people who shut down the Westminster Parliament illegally, the people who seek to undermine the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Parliament at every turn, and the people who accepted £10 million from someone who was racist and called for one of my parliamentary colleagues to be shot. That is extremism. And Lee needs to hold a mirror up to himself and his own party.
And not a word, Stephen, in any of that 2 minutes about how we actually solve extremism in this country. Not a single word. Just a load of partisans.
Well, here's a suggestion for you, Lee. Here's a suggestion for solving the immediate problem that we face with regards to the challenges in society. A party who prorogued Parliament illegally, a party who ignores a devolved settlement in Scotland and Wales,
and a party who
accepted money from a racist who called for an MP to be shot. You get rid of the Conservative Party. That's what you do.
How do you do it?
I'm not going to be distracted.
I'm not going to be failed to answer the question about how you deal with extremism.
I am not going to be distracted by your divisive, deflective agenda.
Hang on, just 1 second. Louise's question is about, will this revised definition of extremism actually prevent extremism? You still haven't answered that question, Stephen.
Because
we hear what you say about the Conservative Party, and of course you're entirely within your rights to make that point. But in answering Louise's question, will this revised definition of extremism actually prevent it?
The important point here is that this is just a deflection.
No, but answer the question. Can you answer the question? I'll give you one last chance.
No, I don't believe
you don't answer it. Fair enough.
In terms of what the government have done today. But this is a deflection, and we can't escape from that.
Melanie.
I don't think definitions of extremism actually will do anything to counter extremism. We already have a definition of extremism. This is another one. Michael Gove says this is a better one. I don't know whether it's better or not. You need a microscope to see the difference. I can see there is a difference, but I'm not persuaded that the difference in language is going to make any difference on the ground. It seems to me that the problem has not been about definitions of extremism. There are plenty of laws already on the statute book to enable the police to take whatever action is needed to counter all kinds of extremists. The problem is that the police very often will not use those powers, and that is due to a variety of issues and questions depending on the circumstances. But, for example, when it comes to neo-Nazi extremists, and Michael Gove announced 2 organisations which are going to be proscribed from government.
Well, he says he's assessing them at the moment, yeah.
They're assessing them. Those don't need any definition of extremists. We all know what neo-Nazis are. But when you look at the Shawcross report on the malfunctioning of the PREVENT programme, a programme which the government set up some years ago to deal with extremism, you find that what has happened there, what's gone wrong there, is in the failure to correctly to take action against the kind of people who pose the greatest threat. And that's due to a variety of reasons. In other words, the problem is not with the definition. The problem is with what's going on, what's going wrong with the people who have been entrusted with the task of keeping us safe. And as far as I can see, this new definition is not going to address that problem.
OK. Man in the blue sweater.
Yes, so I just want to remind you that he actually said when he looks at Diane Abbott...
Oh, this is Frank Hester you're talking about, yeah.
Yes, it makes him hate all black women and that she should be shot. If that is not extremism, I don't know what it is. And I'm sorry, I'm thinking about... I am also thinking about countless of black women, especially black girls, who hear that on TV, and that's a massive safeguarding issue. I mean, what this little girl would actually think, that she's not accepted in the society that we live in. I mean, I was not shocked that's how sad it is. We're getting used to that. But I was angry, and I hope that we protect Diane Abbott at all costs, and I hope she receives support from both parties, the Conservative and the Labour Party as well. Thank you.
OK. Yes, the woman with the... Yes.
Instead of redefining extremism, why don't we make penalties worse for hate speech? It seems like Frank Hester, nothing's happened to him. And there seems to be a scandal like this every week, and nothing happens to anybody who makes all these offensive comments.
OK. And yes, in the black sweater, yeah.
Me? Yeah, I mean, for years, as a teacher, we've had the PREVENT strategy rammed down our throats every year. We've had to repeat our PREVENT certificates. And yet, today, suddenly, all of that goes out of the window. Why? We've been building up with Prevent all this time. Is Prevent not good enough anymore?
OK. Aisha.
Well, look, we should take extremism seriously in our society. Joe Cox, the MP, was murdered by a far-right extremist. David Amos was murdered by an Islamist extremist. I think we should be very worried about our young people getting radicalised. I'm from a Muslim background. No Muslim mum or dad wants to see their daughter ending up like Shamima Begum. No Christian mum or dad wants their teenage son to end up like a man called Joe Metcalfe, who's a teenager. He was sentenced to 10 years after being convicted of planning to attack a mosque and kill Muslims. So we should take this seriously. We should take it deadly seriously.
And do you, to Louise's question, do you think this will, what Michael Gove has said today, will actually prevent extremism and that kind of thing?
No, because I think what the government is doing is cynically playing politics with this issue. I think this idea of tackling extremism, if you're going to be serious about it, you have to engage with people, you have to understand what's happening in these communities, you have to work with people in the community. And what I have been seeing cynically over months, I'm sure you've all seen it here, is using extremism as a fig leaf, actually, to promote a lot of anti-Muslim and Islamophobia in this country. And I find it extraordinary that in the week that we have had these comments from this Tory donor, where the Conservative Party took a whole day to even define what racism is, they sent ministers out on the morning round saying this guy hadn't been racist, he had just been a bit rude. He talked about shooting a black woman, not any black woman as well, our first ever elected black woman in British political history. This is a party that couldn't even define that as racist. How on earth are they going to define what extremism is?
I will come back to you. I'm just going to take a few more points.
So the Conservative Party talks about protecting freedom of speech, all being well, but there's a big difference between freedom of speech and spreading misinformation, total garbage, total lies. As the lady said, there seems to be no repercussions or consequences to these people who make such statements. They're not corrected. The correct information is not put out there. Hence why why fascism in this country and extremism is on the rise. People are going to believe those facts that they think are fact, and they spread through social media and have detrimental effects.
Let me just ask, in the interest of balance, is there anyone here who welcomes what Michael Gove had to say and supports what he had to say?
It's gone well, Lee.
Not a hand up, OK. There were other people who had that. You had your hand up there, so let's hear what you've got to say. Yes, the woman with the black polo neck.
I think I would just go one step further and say that there has been a decades-long campaign of inciting and exploiting Islamophobia to suppress dissent.
A decades-long campaign on behalf of who?
I mean, in terms of the Conservatives, the amount of suppression in terms of democracy and free speech, anytime there's dissent that's not got the approval of Whitehall, it feels as though everything's being shoved down and that Islamophobia has always been kind of incited and exploited as this sort of... It always feels as though Muslims are kind of being targeted, and black people as well. I just feel as though it's not... It feels as though there's been a decades-long campaign that hasn't worked with Prevent. It feels as though it's not functioned particularly well.
OK. Let me take one more point. I'll come to you. Yes, this one here.
With Rishi Sunak making transphobic comments in the presence of Brianna Jai's mother and accepting donor money from someone who is, I think we can all agree, is incredibly racist, will the government accept it's complicit in a culture of racism and transphobia?
All right, Lee. Well, listen, let me come back to you. You've got a number of points here. So you had your teacher, you were saying, and you were saying, well, we've been working with Prevent for ages, does that just go out the window now? And perhaps you want to ask the other points as well.
Sure. Look, there's two things here. And the Conservative Party's had a difficult week. And the first thing is that the person who we're talking about, Frank Hester, the comments are wrong. The comments were racist. You have to deal with the specifics. This week it's Frank Hester. A few weeks ago it was Angela Rayner about something else. Before that it was XYZ. Within politics, people say things which are incorrect. The first thing they need to do is say that that was wrong. And then more broadly, as a society, we have to decide what we want to do with people who get things wrong and who say things wrong. And the question is, do we forgive or do we just ostracise? And some people in this audience will say, that's it, we're done, no more. Other people will say, actually, second chances. My personal view, I did this all the way through, I've tried to do it all the way through my career in politics as an MP, is try to give second chances, not just on my side, but on the other side as well. I think we are better as a society, as a community, if we do that. Where comments are wrong, they should be called out. But ultimately, if we give people a second chance, if we say, actually, you still have something to contribute in whatever way, be it MPs or within the political process as a whole, I think we are better as a society for doing that.
OK, I just want to come back on that because it is a disgrace to lump other politicians like Angela Rayner in with what that racist said. Okay? Hang on. He didn't just make a bad comment about people. He said Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women and he wanted to shoot her, OK? That is not just, I have been a bit rude. And when you say he apologised, he did not even recognise his abhorrent, disgusting, frightening racism. He said he had just been a bit rude. He would not even accept that. And if you are going to be preaching to the country about extremism, you have to put your money literally where your mouth is. This guy is a disgusting racist. He is bankrolling the Conservative Party. Will you give that money back?
As I have said, all the way through this, there are different MPs and there are different people in political life that make comments that are wrong. When they are,
Who has said that they're going to shoot somebody? But when have they said they're going to shoot somebody?
John McDonnell and Esther McVeigh. You remember that? John McDonnell said something entirely inappropriate about Esther McVeigh about 10 years ago. So we can all find examples of really, really inappropriate behaviour, of really, really outrageous things that were said. We should say that they're wrong. We should call out that they're wrong. But as a society, we have a broader question, as I say, to answer about whether we accept when people are contrite, that they still have things to
Will you give the money back? You were asked that.
No, well, I'm not in charge, but I don't think we are giving the money back, no.
You don't think we
because
should?
ultimately, if we say that people ask for forgiveness, if people say they were wrong, we've said it's wrong, he said it's wrong.
So basically, £15 million gives you a blank cheque for racism and extremism.
And that is absolutely not correct. That is not correct. And next time, Aisha, in the Labour Party, somebody says something that is incorrect and somebody says something that is absolutely wrong, and I hope and I will look forward to you absolutely cutting them out of public life forever.
Yeah.
Full stop. Okay.
All right, I'm just going to say, can I just say, and I have to say this because Frank Hester is not here to defend himself. As you say, he has apologised for being rude.
Yeah.
That's the comment he's made. He has also said separately, and you may not agree with this, but he has also said separately that he abhors all forms of racism. I know. Listen, this is my job. He is not here to defend himself. I'm just putting his point of view. We could talk about this for quite some time. OK, let's give another 2 or 3 minutes. And before I move on.
The comments were clearly racist, they were clearly abhorrent, they were clearly wrongly. I don't know why anyone would want to morally compromise themselves so much by defending it. But for you, do you not see what this audience has said tonight? You have lost the legitimacy to tackle a really serious issue, which is extremism. Because these people and the people at home, they will not listen when you operate that double standard as a government. And you didn't come out as a government and say it was wrong. First of all, you said it was rude. Then you said it was racist. Then you said it was racist, but the money wasn't racist. And then you were saying that you take more of the money, and now we find out you have. Of course it's wrong. And the Prime Minister knows it's wrong, but the fact is he's too weak. And if you can't govern, you've got to call an election rather than do that so people can make the choice.
We've said it's wrong. I'm saying it's wrong here tonight. I mean, it's clear.
There's a forest of hand-ups. I'm just going to take a few more points before I move on. God, where shall I start? The woman here in the black with the glasses, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, you said that it's about giving people a second chance and basically saying forgiveness. To be quite frank, it's not your place to say that, you know, he deserves a second chance. It's not my place, but it's definitely not your place or any Conservative Party member or any party member who's saying, we'll give him a second chance. No. Until Diane Abbott says, I feel like this has been genuinely addressed, then I literally don't really care about what anyone says about we don't support
right towards the back. We haven't had anyone from the very back. The man, I think you've got a pink shirt on. No, further back.
Yes. It's as abhorrent as what Frank Hester said about Diane Abbott. It's part of a pattern of people connected to the Conservative Party, because there were the comments by Suella Braverman, many comments by Suella Braverman, actually. And then what happened with Liz Truss and Steve Bannon, Robert Jenrick and others. So if we're getting this from the government about counter-extremism, but the government has so many of its own problems with its own senior figures.
And just a little bit further along with, yes, you've also got glasses on, yeah.
Yes, so when you say second chances, like, how far is too far when you talk about second chances? Like, how much money do you keep taking from these people who are horrible, but, like, they can't even say if they're apologising or not for the right thing? They're sort of caught in this sort of trap. Like, how far is too far? What's the limit?
Of unacceptability, I guess is what you're saying. And just, let's go to the man next to you as well. You've got your hand up.
I'm just wondering, if the chequebook come out tomorrow, or the helicopter keys, would the Tories say no?
You might as well answer that before I move on. Would you take more money? I mean, we had the Kevin Holland saying last night, yes, possibly.
I've already talked about that. But the fundamental point is, and I understand, and as I say, it is wrong and it was racist. And the question is, when these things happen, whether today in my party, tomorrow in another, the day after in my party again, we all want it not to happen, but when it does, what do we do as a society? What do we do as a community? And I absolutely accept the point that is being made by a number of people in the audience, but the question is, what do we do about it long term? And do we say that second chances work?
Well, I think your solution was provided to you very eloquently by an audience member who said we should listen to what Diane Abbott has to say in this regard. And I don't know if anyone else sitting in this room right now was furious on Wednesday at the fact that the Westminster establishment stopped Diane Abbott from being able to question the Prime Minister on this.
You mean the Speaker of the House when you say the Westminster establishment?
Can I just make one other point?
Very briefly, because I want to move on.
At the heart of all of this, with all the politicking going on, is a woman, and that woman is Diane Abbott. And I think what we forget is she is a human being like the rest of us. This woman was our first ever black elected woman into Parliament. In that time, she has been abused, humiliated, mocked, and now she's been threatened with death. And I do think, what does it say about our society that almost 40 years on after the first ever black woman was elected, that we are in this cesspool of racism? I spoke to Diane this week, and what that woman has had to go through. So in the middle of all of this, yes, there's lots of accusations, but there is a human being at the heart of all of this, and her name is Diane Abbott.
OK. I am going to move on. Lots of you want to talk about this next question, so I want to take it. Just before I do, I want to say that we have got one more show before the Easter break, so that's next week. We are in Middlesbrough. Then after the Easter break, we return on the 18th of April in Buxton. So if you are in or around Middlesbrough or Buxton and you'd like to come be part of the show, be part of the audience, follow the instructions on the Question Time website, and hopefully we'll see you at one of those two programmes. Right, let's take another question now from James Pritchard.
With 12,300 children dead in Gaza, will the government or opposition put any meaningful pressure on Israel to end the slaughter?
Jonathan.
The situation in Gaza is unconscionable, and everybody wants to see a breakthrough, everybody wants to see a ceasefire, and clearly the need to get aid into Gaza at scale to deal with that humanitarian situation is palpable and obvious to see. it is a huge frustration for everyone, I think, watching those scenes to wonder how can we meaningfully have a breakthrough that will deliver that. A ceasefire's got to be both sides. It's got to, that's what a ceasefire is, both sides being willing to do that, and that is a challenge with the leaders, I think, on both sides of that. I was on this programme, if you remember, in October in Bradford, where it had just begun. If you told me at this stage we'd still be talking about the lack of a breakthrough, even I wouldn't have believed it could be such a stalemate. But I do believe the circumstances now, especially with, I don't think Hamas will be part of the future of Gaza, and therefore I think there is not just the potential for a ceasefire, but the potential for a long-term, meaningful peace process. And that is what's required. We can't have this cycle of violence just coming back on an annual or a monthly basis. We need a long-term breakthrough to a two-state solution. I think, bleak as things are, there is the potential for that. And sometimes, in situations like this around the world, things get so horrendous that they provide the means that we can never go back to it, and the will is created to move forward. And I think that is possible, though I have to say I feel very depressed and very frustrated when I see it. And I look at the amount of time and the human toll of what we have seen, and it is absolutely unconscionable.
Stephen.
The events on October the 7th have rightly been condemned by all political parties. They were utterly abhorrent, and the hostages who still remain in control, who are still under the control of Hamas, must be released. But my colleagues and I have been consistent since the weeks following that we need to have an immediate ceasefire. And the reason for that is simple, is that the people of Palestine are being collectively punished for the actions of a terrorist group. They are being denied access to water, to food, to medicine, to electricity, to the ability to leave. And meantime, they are being indiscriminately shot and bombed. 70,000 men, women and children injured. 30,000 men, women and children dead. And I have been utterly ashamed to be a member of the Westminster Parliament, as it has sat for months in silence instead of calling for that immediate ceasefire. And two things need to happen now. We finally dragged the Labour Party to a position where it backs a ceasefire, and hopefully we can get the government to do likewise. But meantime, we need to end arms sales to Israel, and we need to use our voice, the UK's voice, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council to advocate immediately for a ceasefire. No ifs, no buts.
And let me just ask you, Stephen, when you say no ifs, no buts, and you've become completely clear with at the SNP that you want an immediate ceasefire, and as you say, you've called for that consistently, how do you get the hostages released?
Nothing would please me more than to see the hostages.
But if you,
it is
but
utterly
the
appalling.
ceasefire is not conditioned upon that you're calling for, is it?
No, because I'm sorry, but there is no justification for bombing, targeting and collectively punishing a civilian population for the actions of a terrorist group. Okay. And what needs to happen is there needs to be an end to fighting, there needs to be an immediate discussion. We need to see the UK and the US show some backbone, stand up to Benjamin Netanyahu and get this sorted.
So it's have the ceasefire, as you say, and then hope that somehow the hostages get released.
And then use the voice that we have collectively across the world to advocate for making sure those hostages are released. Absolutely.
Melanie.
I live mainly in Israel. I come here a great deal. I am British. I will always be British. And it is a tragedy beyond measure that so many decent people, well-meaning people in Britain, have got this completely the wrong way around. What's happening in Gaza is indeed a tragedy. War is terrible. Civilians are killed. But what Stephen has just said is so distorted and so untrue. Let me just take you through one or two points that he has said.
That's good.
He says that the Gazans are being denied by Israel access to food and humanitarian supplies.
Yes.
This is completely untrue. There have been hundreds and hundreds of trucks going through Gaza. There have been hundreds of trucks stopped by from going through Gaza because the food is being stolen by Hamas. The Gazans themselves are saying this. You laugh because you don't know. I am telling you.
But hang on. Melanie, in fairness, the UN says that not enough trucks are being allowed in, and that children are dying of starvation. You've got UNICEF saying children are dying of starvation.
The UN has had its own operatives in UNRWA, the Relief and Welfare Organization, who are members of Hamas, dozens and dozens of them. They are entirely compromised.
OK, so just, Melanie, I'll let you speak, I promise, but just to be clear what you're saying, when you've got the WHO and the UN and the EU humanitarian chief saying there is famine in Gaza, you're saying that's not true.
You can go
is that what you're claiming?
you can go on YouTube and see pictures of the stocked food markets in Gaza. Why are you laughing?
Because
have you
it's
seen
outrageous.
Them? Have you
Why
seen
they're laughing?
them?
Actually,
have you seen these
Melanie,
video pictures?
I have looked at some of them. They don't have timestamps on them. I've got to point that out. So I don't know when these pictures were taken.
OK.
I mean, if you have proof that they were taken in the last October...
if you want to look at pictures, Melanie, I'm quite happy to send you some pictures and videos of civilians being bombed and slaughtered at the hands of...
Let's let Melanie make a point.
I'll show you some videos.
OK. If you want to talk about slaughter, Stephen, you accuse Israel of indulging in collective punishment. You talk about October the 7th and how abhorrent that was. These are crocodile tears by you. Your hypocrisy is epic. Hamas, let me finish.
Let her finish and then I'll let you come back.
Let me finish. That was merely the start. Hamas and Hezbollah have said they intend to kill every Jew and wipe out the state of Israel. If you had your way and there was a ceasefire now, there would be more pogroms and more slaughters of Israelis. The Israelis do not want to kill Palestinians in Gaza. It's the last thing they want. Hamas have made the Gazans into not just human shields, but cannon fodder. Hamas shoot Gazans when they try to find safe areas. Hamas are in tunnels for their own safety. Not one shelter has been built by Hamas in all the time they have ruled Gaza for the Palestinians under bombardment. The only reason that Israel is having to bombard Gaza is because they cannot get at the infrastructure of mass terror and genocide which has been put underground. Collective punishment, this is how this man talks about the defense against genocide. Collective punishment is how he describes the desperate attempt by Israel to prevent a genocide from happening and a second Holocaust from happening. I don't think people here understand. What do you think that Hamas mean when they say we wish to kill every Jew? What do you think they did when they slaughtered 1,200 Israelis and took others hostage with a terrible fate we don't yet know? And not only that, they say they will do it again and again, and they mean it. Why do you sneer at this? Why do you dismiss it? Why do you call the defence against mass murder collective punishment? Would you have called it collective punishment when the Allies bombed Germany? You would have said it was a defence against fascism and Nazism. Israel is trying to prevent a second Holocaust. That is not an exaggeration. That is what is threatened. You don't understand, I'm afraid. Well-meaning people here have no idea what it's like to be in Israel. Not only is it a very small country, there is virtually not a single household that is not personally touched by this. Either they've had family or friends murdered on October 7. They're being taken hostage. Their boys and girls, their grandchildren, children are on the front line and they are dying every day. There are rockets, hundreds of rockets every day coming from the north, from the Hezbollah.
OK, Melanie, you're making your points very powerfully. I'm just going to, because you've made some accusations against Stephen, I want to let him answer.
You know what? Those weren't accusations. Those were outrageous, disgusting slurs, and I actually feel quite sorry for you.
We heard what you said.
However, at the invitation of a member of the Israeli embassy in London, I sat in a room alongside some of the families of the victims of October the 7th and watched the raw footage of what happened. And I don't think I slept for the best part of a week, but I have the ability and the personality to be able to differentiate between the horrors that occurred and the response by Benjamin Netanyahu, the unjustified and unconscionable response of the Israeli government. And I genuinely hope with all sincerity that one day you can too.
All right, I'm gonna let some people come in from the audience. It's the man here in the very front.
I've put a question in earlier when the emails came in, and what I was asking is, does the normal Palestinian citizen have any input into ridding the country of its ruling Hamas party, such that if you have a two-state solution, it will never happen while they fear Hamas is still there? You need the country to be run by the actual Palestinian citizens, and that stop and get rid of the Hamas people, so there's no need to bomb.
I mean, it's not the easiest thing, I would say, for someone, Palestinian, to stand up to Hamas.
It needs a civil uprising.
OK, let's take a few more points here. It's the man in the yellow T-shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just one thing that I was always trying to pass on to everybody. What I would say to you on the panel is replace one thing in this whole situation, and that is change Israel for any other nation on the planet, and see if you would have sat back as long with what Israel have done. Would you have done the same with any other nation, or would you have stepped in early and gone, no, that's over the line, they've gone too far, you need to stop?
OK. And the man at the very... towards the back there, yes, you got your hand up. We'll just get a microphone to you. Yep, that's you, sir.
Yeah. You're talking about what's happening in Israel, and the question keeps getting put back to the main two parties. How can you justify asking Israel to do something when you're not asking Hamas to do something? The answer to that's very simple. Israel is an ally, a democratically elected government. Israel is that. Hamas is a terrorist organisation. We should hold Israel to a higher standard. What is happening is wrong. We need that to say that. We need leadership to say that. We should use our voice on the UN Security Council to say that. That's the simple answer. We should hold Israel to a higher standard to Hamas. What Hamas have done is wrong. It's terrible. But doing nothing, we're becoming a complicit in that. We need to say to our friends, you should be doing better, and they should be doing better.
Aisha.
Well, look, I mean, everybody watching and everybody in this room is just absolutely horrified by what we're seeing, and you can hold two thoughts in your head at the same time. You can feel the understandable pain and anguish and fear of the Jewish community because of what happened on the 7th of October, that orgy of violence and evil, and you can also feel pain and horror when you look at what is happening in Gaza, the death toll and the injury. So most people can hold both of those things in their head. Most people want peace, of course they do, but let's not kid ourselves, it's not that easy. And if we're absolutely honest, a ceasefire has never felt more remote, because essentially you've got two sides that don't want a ceasefire. Hamas, as Melanie has rightly alluded to, don't want a ceasefire, and they have said that they would not stop attacking Israel. But on the other side, you've got Netanyahu in one of the most extreme right-wing governments in modern history in Israel, and there's lots of protests against him as well. Neither side want a solution or a compromise. To your point at the front, the gentleman in the pink shirt, you talked about the Palestinians needing new leadership. I agree. I think the Israelis also need new leadership if we want to try and get some resolution. In the meantime, we have got to get aid into Gaza. The idea that we're now shipping aid in and we're building this port, which could take up to 60 days, we need to get aid by truck, by road, into Gaza. And everybody in the diplomatic community is trying to be very sensitive to all the understandable concerns that people have, but pressure has got to be put now to get this aid in. Parachuting it in is a nonsense. Shipping it in is just logistically so difficult. The way to get it, I mean, the ceasefire is going to take a long time. There's no simple slogans or solutions to this. We've got to stop this famine. They are on a brink of a famine, and the international community has got to get together, and we've got to get aid into Gaza.
OK. Lee. Let's come back to James's question. Will the government and the opposition, but you've answered, John, will the government put any meaningful pressure on Israel to end the slaughter? Now, we heard that most senior Democrat in the States today, Chuck Schumer, saying Netanyahu's got to go, for example. David Cameron has been increasingly critical. Will the government put any meaningful pressure to end the slaughter?
Well, there's a huge amount of work going on in the background, as there often is in these kind of foreign policy issues, to try to move it forward. But it is hugely difficult. And it's hugely difficult for one reason. This could stop right now. It could stop this second without a single additional drop of blood being spilled. And the way that happens is for Hamas to lay down their weapons. It is for Hamas to say that they will not try to repeat October the 7th, where 1,200 civilians were murdered, raped, beheaded and burnt alive. It is for Hamas to release 200 people, the element of that 200 people who are sadly left, who they dragged back into Gaza and are now using as human shields. And it is for Hamas to say that they will no longer say that they will do this time and time and time and time again. And the other thing Hamas could do is remove from its charter, its founding principles, the way in which it has worked for the past 30 years, virulently anti-Semitic statement which wants to wipe Israel off the map. So I want a ceasefire tomorrow. I want all of this horrible thing.
Everything you say is, of course, true, but there's no chance of that happening with Hamas.
Well,
I think we can all agree that. So how do we get to end this?
Blame Hamas. Let's have 80% of this discussion about Hamas, about a virulently anti-Semitic, murderous group of people that started this, perpetuate this, and have it within their power to stop it tomorrow and are choosing not to do so.
OK. I just want to take a couple more points. The man in the check shirt, sort of in the middle.
Didn't Hamas actually offer that, and Benjamin Netanyahu denied it? He offered him to release the hostages in turn for a ceasefire, and he denied it. So what does that tell you?
But what they haven't done is said that they won't try to do it again and again and again. They stated that explicitly. If Hamas stopped all of this, I absolutely agree. Ceasefire immediately. But Hamas are refusing to do so.
The woman here in the cream sweater. Hang on, we'll just get the microphone to you.
I lived in London in the early 90s, and I remember the IRA. By the way, I am a proud Jew. And I remember back then when we had to avoid bombings and watch out where we were. I remember my friends here saying, we do not negotiate with murderers. We don't negotiate with terrorists.
Though, of course, in the end, we did.
Sorry.
In the end, we did. The government did.
Do you think...
Sorry, carry on making your point.
Do you think Hamas is like the IRA? Do you think Hamas would sit down with us? I'd be ready. I believe you. I think that if if Hamas said it was over, then so much would change. I don't think this is the Palestinian people. Hamas is not the Palestinian people. Let's make that very separate. Don't forget that people from Palestine came over to Israel. They would come over to work. I mean, some of the hostages are people who worked with Arabs, with people in Gaza, with Palestinians. Don't forget that. Don't forget in Israel, we have Arabs and Israelis, Jews and Arabs working together, living together, trying to make life good. Okay. Let's look and see what's happening there with Israel. Let's not forget what was going on with Hamas. The Palestinians brought them, they elected them, and then what happened with all that money? Look at all those great tunnels, right? We know this. Jews know this. Jews know this. And that's what's so exhausting.
OK, thank you for your point. I'm going to take another question. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to try and fit it in, and I know we will return, sadly, to talking about Gaza. As you say, when you were on in Bradford, who thought we'd be talking about it this many months on? Alison Litherland. Yes.
If a judge, having heard all the circumstances, all the facts of a case, gives a substantial sentence of up to 4 years, how is justice served by releasing that person early on a whim?
So the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, announced this week that prisoners could be released from jail 2 months early. That was on top of having already done that. An early decision to release prisoners 18 days early. He's now extended it to 2 months. Basically, the prisons are too full. Stephen, actually, they're too full in Scotland as well, aren't they? It's not just a problem down in England.
Well, indeed, and much of this has been a consequence of a lack of investment in public services, of which our judicial system is very much at the heart of. And, you know, that stems from...
prisons are devolved in Scotland, so you could build more prisons if you wanted to.
Prisons are devolved in Scotland. The justice system in Scotland is devolved and it's separate. What is not devolved and separate is, of course, the Chancellor's budget, which he makes, and that obviously impacts upon the money that's available in Scotland. And there's been obviously a 10% reduction in the capital budget, capital grant to the Scottish Government in order to build these new things.
So the fact that Scotland, I mean, you've got an overcrowding problem in Scotland. We'll come to England as well, of course, but you've got an overcrowding problem in Scotland. Scotland has more inmates per 100,000 population than England or Wales or even than the European average. Now, that's not down to the Westminster Government, is it?
Well, no, it's down to, obviously, people committing crimes and going to jail. I know from listening very closely to Scotland's Justice Secretary that there's a real desire and determination in order to ensure that we can have proper rehabilitation so that we don't have this endless cycle which exists, particularly amongst those people who live in poverty, may I add, who go into a lifestyle, and that lifestyle is perpetuated throughout their entire existence on our planet. And we need to be in a position where we can change that and do good by these people. I'm not entirely abreast of the situation in England. You'll have to forgive me.
Well, England's doing what Scotland's already doing, which is releasing offenders early. And Alison's question is justice served by releasing offenders early?
Justice is served by making sure that someone doesn't commit a crime again and breaking the link between reoffending, which quite clearly exists. And obviously, if the prison system is under pressure, that's as a result of the financial decisions that have been taken by the Treasury over very many years through austerity to cut back on investment in public services. But we need to reappraise and refocus how we look at our justice system. We shouldn't just send everyone to jail on a whim. People should only be going to jail for the most serious of crimes, and people who can be rehabilitated must be rehabilitated. It benefits us all.
Aisha.
Well, look, this is just another symptom of, I'm afraid, what is now known as broken Britain. We have a real problem with law and order in this country. We've had police cuts, so it's a miracle if anyone even turns up if you report a crime. There are big backlogs in our court system. Justice delayed is justice denied for a lot of the victims. There are now not enough prison places to put all these people in prison. Many serious crimes, like rape, have practically become decriminalised. People are going into shops and just filling their boots and the police won't turn up. Antisocial behaviour is off the chart. So we have got a real problem with law and order in this country. And the Conservatives used to be the party of law and order. And I just wish, instead of, like, whipping up hatred against minorities or othering other communities, I want to see politicians and ministers get on with the job, get tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime.
So we have not got long, so I'm going to ask you to be reasonably brief because I do want to try and bring the audience in as well. Lee.
Well, we talk about what the problem is. The problem is a hangover from COVID. There was a lot of... But there is. And sometimes politicians have to be clear. You know, you can laugh or scoff, but the reality is that during COVID, when you take out a substantial proportion of your capacity in your courts for a while, there's a backlog that builds up. And so a backlog of people have built up within the system, including within jail. We were building 20,000 new places, but when the spike happened after COVID, we've got to work through that. And we're trying to work through it, and that's happening, but it's going to take time. And what politicians need to do is to say, we've got a problem, let's work through it, let's put a plan in place to do that, which is what is happening.
But just on prison places, the 2019 manifesto promised to add 10,000 more prison places. Then you had another go in 2021, promising 20,000 more places by the mid-2020s. But by last July, it was only just about 5,500.
Yeah, and
it's
increased. I mean, it takes a long time to build a prison. I've been involved from...
Yes, but you promised 20,000 by the mid-2020s.
And we're doing that. And we're moving it forward. We're making sure that more prison places come on. But whilst we've got a challenge of trying to work through this backlog, we have an issue. And what we have to do when we say we've got an issue, whether it's in this part of public service or another part, is have a plan, which is what we're doing, building 20,000 places, and making sure that we implement that plan rather than going back to square one.
Reasonably briefly, Melanie.
The lady says it's a joke. I entirely agree. The system is simply not fit for purpose. I think Aisha is absolutely correct. The system from top to bottom is juddering to a halt. COVID is a new one, I have to say.
But it's true, Melanie. The number of people have increased.
That's as may be. My impression is that this crisis is being caused also by much longer sentences, more serious crimes. But you know, I've been reporting on prisons and the justice system for a very long time, and it's always seemed to me that there are no votes in prisons. And the prison system has been neglected for decades by government after government. Prisons, they don't work because nobody cares about them. They should be made to work. They should be, in my view, they should be completely revolutionised, made part of the community, to have a joined-up thinking. None of that is happening. They have been, they've been locking the key and locking people up and throwing away the key. And in fact, locking people up, many, too many to a cell. And everybody forgets about it. And, unfortunately, there is no public pressure because people prefer not to think about it.
Jonathan.
Alison, it's not justice, it's not right, and it also wasn't right to try and hide this announcement and not tell people straight up this is what the government was doing. The truth is, Alison, that there's no public service working better today than when the Conservative Party came to power in 2010. But what is unusual about this is actually an area where the government allocated some money. They put £4 billion into this, and do you know what? They haven't spent it. They've got about a quarter of that spent. And why haven't they spent it? Because they're distracted, because instead they've got to deal with their racist donors or Tory MPs defecting to reform or this, £46
so what would
billion
Labour do? I mean, this is the thing I'm going to end up saying every week.
Spend the money.
And then run up to an election.
If you have a government that is a complete soap opera, day in, day out, it is not focusing on the things that matter.
So is your plan to build more prisons?
If you put £4 billion in to build new prison places, build the prison places. I don't think that's particularly complicated. Well, you haven't, though, Lee. But you haven't, because you've got no focus. And the truth is, put the Parliament channel on any day. Look how early the legislative agenda finishes for this government every day. Look at what... We will not get a proper focus on the things that matter in this country till we get what we want, what we need, what you all want, and that is a general election and the chance to set the direction properly for the next 4 or 5 years.
Let me hear from Alison again. Yes. So what do you think of what you've heard?
What worries me is there aren't enough probation officers or people to do the rehabilitation when people are released, when they get to their automatic release date. And we're releasing lots of people early. They're just going to be free to do whatever they want with no rehabilitation, no probation involvement, no support. They're just going to be allowed to walk out.
OK, I've got a minute left. Let me just hear a couple more points. So the woman at the very back with the glasses.
Yeah, so for me, justice is about prosecuting the correct crimes. For me, the fact that we're still trying to prosecute women, for example, for having an abortion, that doesn't feel right to me. And I know that we don't have the capacity in prisons, but surely it's about, as mentioned, the links to petty crime and the rehabilitation. If someone doesn't have safe and secure housing, if they're struggling for food, if they're struggling for work, they're more likely to commit crime and be in that situation. If the rehabilitation is in place, then we don't need these prison places in the first place.
OK, thank you. Thank you for your point. Right, we are out of time, so forgive me to those who've had your hands up. You in particular had your hands up for ages, so I'm sorry I didn't get to you. Thank you very much for putting all your points and taking part in the discussion. Thank you, of course, to the panel for coming along this evening. Remember, we have one more show before Easter. That's in Buxton, so in Middlesbrough, sorry, so do come along to that. And I just want to say, for these lovely pictures of Liverpool, I'd like to thank Nick Fletcher, Patrick Allen and Jack Pugarides. Thank you for these. It's very nice for me to be back here, since I was originally a Wirral girl, even though I don't sound like it. So I know, my goodness, who'd have thought? Anyway, from Liverpool, from all of us here, until next week, bye-bye.